At this time, we'll call to order the regular meeting of Finance Personnel. This is December 10th, 2024. Amy, roll please.
Alderperson P.
Here.
Alderperson Gantz.
Here.
Mayor Boyd.
I'm here.
Alderperson Kundinger. Here. Alderperson Quigley.
Here.
All right, everyone's here. Thank you. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the November 12, 2024 regular meeting of the Finance Personnel Committee. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Quigley. Discussion or comments? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, public comment upon matters not on the agenda. Comments made during the public comment period shall pertain only to matters under the jurisdiction of the Finance and Personnel Committee. Anyone in person or virtually have any public comments upon matters not on the agenda, now is your time to say something. Everyone's here for something on the agenda, correct? I'm assuming. Good, good, good. For the second time, any public comment upon matters not on the agenda. If you're virtual, just state your name. For the third and final time, any public comment upon matters not on the agenda, now is your time. All right. Item 4. Consideration and possible action on Health Department copier purchase and subsequent service contract. We have Crystal from the Health Department if you want information prior to a motion. If not, I'll make a motion to approve the Health Department copier purchase and subsequent service contract with Complete Office of Wisconsin.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Gantz. Discussion or comments? Looks like there is none. That said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Enjoy your copier. When you get it. Item 5, recommendation and possible action to reclassify the senior building inspector. Dan or Shannon, you want to say something first about that first?
We can. Otherwise, we can wait for questions. But in general, the item in front of you is for the reclassification of the senior building inspector. The senior building inspector has been a non-managerial position in the past. However, with the new budget, the new code compliance officer coming to the department and having a building inspector also within the division places that into a managerial role, and thus requesting the classification for that purpose. Right now, they are both under me. Having a third person under me with digital training, it makes it more appropriate to be under a managerial position of the senior building inspector, and would bring us in line with our peer communities.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, this is something that we've been considering for a while to make this position a manager level position, so it certainly was a no-brainer once we had another position that was added to the table of organization. So it certainly makes sense for our structure.
Thank you. Questions, comments, motion?
A motion approved.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Kundinger, seconded by Alderperson P. to approve the senior building inspector moving to a building inspector manager. Additional discussion and or comments? Is that correct with the motion? Senior building inspector to a building inspector manager, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, recommendation and possible action to approve city manager job description. Do you guys need an overview, or do we have a motion or a second?
I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Alderperson Quigley, seconded by Alderperson Gantz to approve job description changes to the city manager. Now that we have a motion and a second, any discussion or comments?
It's just clarification that this has all been talked through already, so it's just the formal approval process.
Just the formal approval process, and then it cleans up.
Correct. By city ordinance, this is probably the only position that I'm aware of, but ordinance says that the job description shall be approved by the city council, which certainly makes sense. So all the changes that you've recommended or you've approved, and obviously changing the title and the job responsibilities, we're just cleaning that up now and bringing it forward to change the job description.
I'll move to approve. Or did we already do that?
I think we already
I think you did that. We did that.
Yeah, you can do it again if you want. But
Sure.
So we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion or
Do a
comments?
third.
Seeing there is no more, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7. Consideration and possible action on revisions to De Pere Municipal Code, Section 10.5, concerning Assistant City Manager and Comptroller.
A move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion, Alderperson P-Rock, seconded by Alderperson Gantz, to approve the revisions to the De Pere Municipal Code, Section 10.5, concerning Assistant City Manager and Comptroller. Questions or comments? We have the two folks here if you have any. All right, seeing there is none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, consideration and possible action on revisions to De Pere Municipal Code, Section 6.3, rules of order concerning consent agenda for common council meetings.
Move to approve.
I'll second. Motion by Alderperson P-Rock, seconded by me. Again, this is revisions for De Pere Municipal Code, Section 6.3, rules of order concerning consent agenda for common council meetings. So it cleans some stuff up. Actually, it streamlines things. Tony, right? Correct?
Yes, that's correct. It could allow for the approval of multiple agenda items in one motion.
So that's a good thing.
Sounds too logical.
We'll really move along then, will we not? All right, any questions or comments in addition? Alderperson Quigley.
Yeah, just to clarify, so if there's the consent agenda, if there's an individual that wants to discuss a particular item, is there a process so they can kind of break that item out?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, that said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Item 9, consideration and possible action on First Amendment to Development Agreement with Gypsum Management and Supply, Builders Court, parcel numbers WDL1761 and WD1138. Tony, do you want to talk about this at first at all?
Sure. Just to touch upon, this is an amendment to a development agreement that we entered into back in May. There was a delay as far as the closing, which took place in late September and early October. As a result, they had made a request to amend certain dates in the development agreement, to which Dan and I talked and were agreeable with, which also gives us some time to amend TID number 12. So basically, this just memorializes those discussions and amends the dates in the agreement.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Well, I'll make a motion to approve the First Amendment to the development agreement as stated in the memo.
Second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson P-Rock. Additional discussion or comments? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 10, consideration and possible action regarding an amendment to the Deeper Roots Housing Stock Improvement Program. Quason, why don't we have you say a couple things about this, because there's, I think, some pretty significant changes, including a new name. Quason?
Yes, good evening. So the Deeper Roots Housing Stock Improvement Program was something that the council approved back in 2023, I believe. This past year, we marketed it extensively along with Alderman Hanson, Alderman Gantz, particularly during like the Rock the Block celebration event that took place. Unfortunately, we just didn't have a lot of takers with it. Today, we have roughly, I think we have 2 loans right now. That's roughly about $24,000 out in loans, one for $20,000, another one for around like $3,800 with that. So what we looked to do was make some changes to that based on feedback that we heard from some of the constituents. One, we changed the name to simplify it to just the De Pere Home Improvement Loan. Another one was that we wanted to take away the matching funds. Just hearing feedback from folks in the community, that was a discouragement for them in terms of applying. Another one was that we increased it up to $50,000, and we switched it from 0% interest to 1.5% interest, 1.5 percentage points below the 10-year Treasury for up to a 15-year term. So again, so we have like no matching funds with that. And then also we looked to switch it from 100% of area median income up to 120,000, 120% of the area median income as well. So those are pretty much the major changes that we have right now. with that. So again, and also the terms of the median assessed value for the city as well. So you could go up to 100% of the median assessed value, which is roughly about 332,000.
Very good, thank you. A lot of changes. I like the changes. Let's just go to the obvious as well, too, the reach out. Now, we can advertise through social media. We can hope, that the media grabs on it and does a story. But aside from that, what else do we have? Go to banks, or what can we do?
With that, I think it's continuing of just the outreach that we have been doing. I know Andy's been doing a great job in terms of social media. We ran lots of ads, marketing on our social media sites and things of that nature. But it's also helped getting the word out through Definitely De Pere, De Pere Chamber, some of our other partner organizations as well.
Okay. And if others think of anything, just let them know. Dan?
We've also been reaching out to realtors because
Okay,
what
good.
oftentimes is we're finding is individuals are maxing their budget out right off the bat. Now the bad part about that one is if they do that, then our loan to value or debt to income ratio tends to be skewed back the other way, so then they don't qualify. But for those that don't max their loans out right off the bat, potentially could qualify for some home improvement loans so that they are at a lower percentage rate than what their typical mortgage would be. And the reason why we did the percent and a half below the 10-year Treasury note was so that as the market goes up and down, we're not having to come back here to ask for readjustments every year as mortgage rates change. So we'll always be below, typically about 3 percentage points below what the 30-year amortization would be. So that gives them a good added bonus to utilize this program.
And there was another one, just to piggyback off that too. One of the detriments that we heard from individuals was the matching portion. They would have had to take out another loan from their bank. So it, in essence, became like 2 loans for them. So by eliminating that, now we can have it just as 1 loan just for our residents to take advantage of.
All right.
I like that. Alderperson Cunninger?
How about messaging it in water bills? That seems like
I think we've talked about that.
We
for
did talk
something
about
else.
I didn't think that would garner laughing. That's
Well, it was because it was in our radar already,
Yeah.
as we had just talked about water bills and how can we get stuff. What other messaging components do we need to get in there?
yeah.
And that
I'm
was
just
one of them.
thinking, what is something that everybody sees and could qualify, those kinds of things. I think all the changes are really smart and logical, so thank you for doing that and increasing awareness for this opportunity.
And if I can add one more thing, I know he's not here tonight, but Alderperson Hanson asked for what other funding mechanisms can be done to help encourage people to register to a local designation for historic preservation. One of the added components to this one is instead of the 100% threshold for median home value, homes that are locally designated local historic would up to the 150% median value. So again, if you're historic, added opportunity to get that designation, and therefore you get the added benefit of a higher potential home value to that.
Is that added in? Is that going to be
Yep.
like number 7, or is that in there?
No, it's in there.
It's in there.
It's in there. So like on page 2.
Oh, further down. Okay.
Yep.
I read a lot of this, but I must have missed that part, so I apologize. You have a lot of pages here. It's good.
I was
Oh,
going to
it's
say, I was waiting for the joke.
Yeah, that's all we have. Other questions or comments? And I'm not sure if we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Alderperson Gantz, seconded by Alderperson Quigley to approve the amendment to Deep Roots Housing Stock Improvement Program, with the assumption, I'm assuming, that you guys like all 6 of all the changes
The entire,
that have been
yeah,
made?
as presented.
Okay.
Changing the name of the program, too.
Yes.
Right, and that's,
Yes.
that's one of the 6, I think.
That's one of
too,
the
isn't
6
it?
items.
That's one of the 6 items, so
Yes.
everyone's good with all that?
Yeah, I think it's easier for people to understand with the new.
And not just the changes in the 6 items, we actually have the revised program in the packet. So you're just approving the packet. That summary memo just documents what those changes are. So
Very good. So everyone's good with that, the entire packet
Yes.
in total?
Yeah. I think it's great. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments regarding this? All right, seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 11, consideration and possible action on proposed sale and development agreement terms with BCD Holdings LLC, Bedford Paper, for parcels ED-2315 and ED-2311 to develop a 100,000 square foot warehouse facility. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. The item in front of you tonight is in your packet. The terms are included, but I'll kind of do a brief overview. Bedford Paper is an existing business in our East Business Park or East Industrial Park located on Commerce Drive. For those that were here around 2020 and 2021, I think Alderperson Kuniger and Quigley, you may have been privy to this first development. They attempted to come into the city with a large 300,000 square foot expansion back right during the height of COVID. That was a big problem as construction pricing went haywire and steel costs went nearly doubled during that time. And ultimately, much like a lot of projects, that projects got stalled and was put on the shelf. Since that time, where that property was looked at, the city has worked with Belmark to construct plant number 7, and now Amerilux is underway with their 500,000 square foot facility. So kind of roughly along those two parcels is where that was discussed at that time. Now, Bedford is looking to expand their existing operations and is out of space on their current facility. So in working with Bedford and trying to find a location for them, we've looked at a couple different areas, and they want to stick within the east side so that it's better for their operations. And so as a result, our largest component, our largest piece that we have left is what you see on the screen in front of you. It's located off of Rockland Road or Future Generations Avenue. As well as there's a couple parcels to the north, but Coyson and I are in conversations with other projects on those remaining components as well. So this entire area is sort of almost spoken for through initial developments. So what that allows the project, though, to do is Bedford is looking at a kind of a two-phased approach to this project, which is 100,000 square foot, which is roughly in that darker space that you see there, and then in a potential expansion in a few years in that lighter space. Looking at the project, what that would also do is allow Bedford then to relocate some of their warehousing that they have in their current facility, and then offer that facility to be able to expand as a separate project, but concurrently. So they would offer them the opportunity to grow their business while having manufacturing and warehousing slightly separate, but still within the same proximity. So in the packet, you saw some basic components to it, but overall, it's a zero value parcel now. Zoned BP1, no proposed change to that one, or sorry, BP2, no proposed change to that one. When we take a look at what those potential project could be, you're looking at the 100,000 square foot warehouse in phase 1. Again, they may actually trigger phase 2 a little sooner, but for our purposes, we're looking at phase 1 being this 100,000 square feet and phase 2 coming online a couple years later. But in general, you're looking at about a $5.6 million building based off of where we've been at with our projections for open space in a building like that. Which comes at an approximate value per acre of about $800,000, which is above kind of roughly our loose target of that $650,000 target range. And any future growth would help then kind of exceed that target threshold. And I've been working, and I applaud Bedford for, I guess, trying to best maximize the use of our site as possible. So if you know me, I try to really kind of shape our parcels and our projects to be the best maximization use of our site, and we're not overselling property. So in this case, as you can tell in that picture, it kind of fits the site as is. So looking at assumed start date of early 25 with a full valuation date January 1 of 26, which would mean then a full first revenue year of 2027. So phase 2 is on there, but you can kind of see the breakdown. It was in your packet. I won't spend a ton of time into that one. But Bedford has asked for some financial assistance with this project in the form of a land grant as well as a pay-go agreement. And the structure of the pay-go agreement is a percentage-based, and so what that offers them to do is, as the project expands, they won't have to come back here for an amendment to an agreement. As we'd like to craft it is if they trigger it, that also then triggers the additional ceiling for their pay-go agreement incentive, and so encourages them to, the sooner they build, the more incentive that they'll get in the long run, which overall helps the tax increment district. So the but-for test here is. We know overall some recent discussions we've had with other warehousing facilities in the region that design, lighting, and landscaping is very important. And so we're asking for the developer to exceed some of those thresholds when it comes to transition yard buffers and a variety of other elements. So that's a kind of a bit of a but-for test. The screening materials on a warehouse in our business park is a little higher than you see in other communities. So again, exceeding sort of the threshold of what you have in our peer communities. And then knowing that east wall potentially will be an expansion wall as a cost that will be borne now, but then will have to be torn down in the future. So again, that is a cost that has to be borne now that could be considered that but-for test. So looking at all those things, we feel that meets that but-for test for the requirement of the incentive. So based off of that, the proposed development terms that you see there is the phase one being the 100,000 square feet by completion by 2026 with the potential for the additional 60,000 by 2028. That's the target date. But again, as we work through, you'll see some flexibility in that. Phase one timelines are in there. The assessed values are there based off of the projections of, again, against the mill rates that we have today with some assumptions. And the reason why that is important is especially in this case, it may not be the case in all scenarios, but anytime we have property around the South Bridge or the South Bridge Connector project, it's become highly sought after. And these projects not only help them out, but it also helps the South Bridge Connector project. So we do need to make sure that there are protections to again help get that one, because without the road, the projects typically wouldn't happen in this area. So you'll start to see some of those protections. And again, we saw that in our Valley Cabinet agreement and a variety of other agreements that have come through. And then additional components are the additional berm landscaping components against Rockland Road, and you saw that in the concept plan. And so I did include that straight from the zoning code, and a reduced lighting on that side as well. So again, we don't have those potential complaints. And then just a summary expense report at the end of the project. The city components to that one would be a site assembly grant for the value of the property, $210,000. Again, this was one of the projects that are under the old pricing threshold versus the new pricing threshold that we just approved last council meeting. And a developer percentage based off of a percent amount, 47% of the annual increment generating towards the project. And again, it's all in your packet, slightly detailed there. Overall, the entire package in a net present value is about 8.2% of the assessed value, right along the line of where we were with Valley Cabinet, slightly less with where we were in some of the TID 11 projects and TID 12 projects, but that's just because there's additional life in that TID. So overall, we are in line with where we've been with other projects recently, and staff would recommend approval.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Alderperson Cuniger?
No, I would just prefer to hear from, are people here to
Yep.
speak on this?
Bedford is here. You want to hear from them?
Before, yeah.
All right.
Is anybody in the audience here to speak about it?
I think Bedford's here. Would you guys like to speak or add anything to what was stated? Or do you want to wait for a motion? If so, you can go to the table right there, give us your name and address. I'll make a motion to open the meeting.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Cuniger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Again, name and address, please. And then
My name is Steve Peters. I reside at 2399 Loxley Court in Swamico. And I'm currently I am the president of Bedford Paper.
very good. Anything you'd like to add? Any questions you have directly, Alderperson Cuniger?
No, just wanted to have anybody who came speak before I ask questions.
I might just add that, we currently, we've invested in this past year in 2024, $10 million to our current business at 1891 Commerce Drive. We did some work within the internal of the building and external facade, if you will, by updating our offices. That cost us about $2 million. We invested almost $7 million in some new converting assets that just started up 1 week ago, as well as updated some automation within the building itself. We've continued throughout the year to add additional people to the staff, new converting line, and just building a bigger infrastructure. We've been adding, a fair number of people. Currently, we're at about 65 employees at 1891 Commerce Drive. We currently lease from Amerilux on the west side of town, and that lease is coming due. We evaluated what we want to do from a leasing versus building perspective. We felt it was in our best interest to build an asset that we have, full control of, and that we can have some, plan on some future growth. So Dan mentioned earlier that we're also at the same time and concurrently, we're going to be adding on to our building this year. We're adding 60,000 square foot onto 1891 Commerce Drive. That's to take additional warehousing space, which again, we still lease additional warehousing space, and we need to have that replaced by the end of 2025, going into 2026. So they're somewhat connected, but again, we do lease space off-site that we have to replace, and that's what the 2 lots off of Rockland Road would fulfill.
Thank you. Well, Steve is here. Anyone have any direct questions for Steve? All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else want to speak on this item on the agenda with Bedford Paper and the terms? Just raise your hand or step up. All right, I'll make a motion to go back to regular session.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Quigley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I would make a motion to approve the development agreement terms with BCD Holdings, LLC, Bedford Paper for the parcels identified within the memo.
I'll second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Cuniger. Additional discussion and/or comments? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Item 12, consideration and possible action on the award of the contract for design and construction administration of a public parking structure at 230 North Wisconsin Street, ED-875, to the team of GRAEF, Berners Schober, ECS. Dan, do you want to comment on this?
Yep. In your packet, you see a summary memo that documents the process that we went through as part of the public parking ramp component. As part of all this, we just want to remind the committee that funding of the design as well as the construction is primarily done through the tax increment districts. So it's just an added little note that wasn't included in your packet. But we put out an RFP for design and architectural services and also a RFP for construction manager at risk. And those are two separate but concurrent RFPs out there. The purpose behind them is to help the construction manager at risk will ultimately feed into the design services. But that being said, as we put out the RFP, it was open for about a month. We responded to several inquiries of questions throughout that time frame, but ultimately we received 2 responses to this project. Our scope was fairly specific, but also vague enough because we just don't know what we don't know in some of this, and so it may have been a little bit more challenging for some to respond. But the ones that we did get quality responses from two proposals. One primarily led by GRAEF and one primarily led by EUA with a Walker team. That being said, as staff felt after doing our review that they were very similar in capabilities, scope, and responsibilities and resources, but one came in significantly lower when it came to overall cost. And so in the packet, you see that when we did our analysis based off of qualifications, capabilities, project understanding, approach, project time frame, and budget. Budget really was the one that kind of skewed, I guess you'd say, the unanimous decision to recommend GRAEF as part of this project. So they do have a local architecture firm as part of their project. GRAEF will be doing the majority of the structural work, where Berners Schober will be doing the majority of the architectural components that are, I guess you say, the design elements that the public is mostly aware of. And then ESC is the geotechnical engineer as part of this project as well. I do have all the packet and the information's in your packet. Both proposals were in your packet, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? I'd make a motion to approve the contract for design and construction administration for the public parking structure to the team of GRAEF, Berners Schober, ECS.
Second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Cuniger. This does go to council then, correct?
Yes.
All right, so this is the start of the project, folks. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Item 13, consideration and possible action on a request from Definitely De Pere to waive invoice number 2024-0801-5405 related to the 2024 Tour De Pere special event for $1,461.25.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Cuniger, seconded by Alderperson P-Rock to approve the request to waive the invoice. Any questions or comments? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 14, consideration and possible action on the City of De Pere investment and cash detail for October of 2024. Pam is here if you have any questions. Otherwise, I would move to accept it and place it on file.
A second.
Motion by me, seconded by Alderperson Gantz. You obviously have the memo, and people at home can read it as well. That said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 15, future agenda items. Does anyone have anything? It appears not. Item 16, consideration and possible action on Step 2 of the De Pere Police Union grievance regarding employee policy manual acknowledgement form. So everyone's aware how this is going to work. Up here will be represented by our Assistant City Attorney, Eric Erdman. So you're going to take us through this. Attorney Wakowitz will then represent out at the table, correct? Us, along with Shannon and others. And then, of course, we have coming up here the Police Association and their representative as well. So Officer Hanson. All right, Mr. Erdman, it's yours.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So how I think we can do this is the grievant can go first and present information however you'd see fit in support of the grievance. The city then would get a chance to put forth their position and statements on however they'd like to proceed on the grievance, and then there'd be a time for rebuttal of each side, and then the Finance Committee can ask questions throughout as well. If there are, you can either ask them, maybe after the presentation or after each side is gone. It's kind of up to you. So, and then generally, the Finance and Personnel Committee has the authority of whether or not to uphold the grievance. They may deliberate in closed session if they so choose, although they are not required to. And then ultimately, if they do make a decision on the status of the grievance, they would do that or announce a decision in open session. So the grieving party may go first whenever they're ready and present the information they'd like to present.
Thank you. Just for the record, I'm Tom Suchevich with McGillis-Weimer Legal Counsel. With me is Union President Aaron Hansen. Just two handouts for everybody for some context here.
Thank you.
Printed in color too. I splurged for y'all.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, good luck on that one.
All right, you all have been speeding through today. I'll do my best to keep that going. And that's not an attorney's brief, that's a real person's brief, I promise. So just some context to why we're here. I'm going to assume everybody has no information on how the police department is run, so forgive me if I'm going over the basics. The collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, that is the governing document for the police department. Anyone who's under the union, represented by Mr. Hansen here, they are governed by the CBA. Where the CBA is silent, then the city handbook then is the authoritative document. Only where the CBA is silent does the city handbook actually apply to the police officers. To that end, if there's a conflict in the city handbook and the collective bargaining agreement, per city policy, I believe it's 1.03 in the handbook, the CBA trumps the actual handbook. That's understood. Everyone's in agreement on that. So if you look at this first document, the City of De Pere memo, on August 14th, 2024, you'll see some proposed changes to the city handbook. The City Council approved changes to the employee policy manual, and these were sent out to everybody in the police department, and they were asked to actually sign off and agree to these changes and sign off on the handbook. The problem that the union's legal counsel and individual members had was that some of these policies that were changed don't apply to the police officers. The CBA actually trumps some of these policies, and some of them are just on their face plain inapplicable. For example, if you look on the first page, 2.2, work schedule / remote work, added that employees that answer department main phone lines while on site will be required to answer the phone lines while working remotely. Doesn't apply to the police officers. 4.9, dress code, appearance and demeanor. Effective January 1, 2025, increase the annual safety shoe allowance from $125 to $200. There's actually a employee personnel policy in the CBA, the CBA governs on that. Next page, If you look at 6.3 overtime, police officers are not seasonal recreation employees. That doesn't apply. 7.2 and 7.6 vacation and holidays, that doesn't apply to them at all. So to that end, when it was brought to legal counsel's attention, we wanted language in the agreement that each officer would sign, just acknowledging that they are agreeing and assenting to be covered by any policy that's actually applicable to them when the CBA is silent. That's all we were wanting, and that was not added. If you look at the next document, that is a draft of a letter that was placed in each employee's file who failed to acknowledge and sign off on the updates to the city policy manual. If you look at the second paragraph, second sentence in there, you are hereby put on notice that you are required to know, understand, and follow all policies enacted by the city of De Pere. That's somewhat true, but not completely true. The police officers would not be required to follow example 4.9 on this other memo on the annual safety shoe allowance because there's a conflicting provision. All we wanted is in the assumed yearly, it's going to be a problem going forward anytime there are any changes to the policy manual. We just want language in there saying, agree to the changes as they pertain to you or as the CBA is silent, something to that effect. And then same thing in this letter. What we're requesting is that this letter is pulled from the members' files because it's not completely accurate, and have something that reflects that they actually signed the policy once it's actually been resolved. Again, this is a really simple issue. You know, to me, it's a bunch of hullabaloo for nothing. One sentence on something we all agree in that's in the city policy that really should have just been in the memo when asked for it too, and when they signed off. I'll turn it over to Union President Hanson if he has any additional comments, kind of talking about what future fears could kind of come if the letter is not pulled specifically and if employees are made to agree to policies that don't apply to them.
Yeah, I just want to mention that in conversations that I've had, I think there's an agreement that the CBA does trump what the city policies are. There's an understanding that there would be, that when the CBA is silent, as he said, that we would then fall under those city policies. We're not disagreeing with that. We're just looking for a little bit more clarification for our members and for people that are signing the form. We don't want to sign a form that we see as right now contradictory, because they're asking us to follow and adhere to all city policies when that is contradictory of the CBA. Moving forward, we also don't want our younger, eager officers that are hoping to pave a career here and move forward with promotions and build their career to be brought down by that letter, or that letter being brought into consideration whenever they're up for a promotional process. Simply because, as I just stated, that we don't want to sign a form that seems to be contradictory. We're just looking for a little bit more clarity, and then in that sense, we're looking to sign the form and hopefully have those letters pulled. And then moving forward, we would have that language going forward from year to year, so that we're not having a letter placed in our file every year and allowing those to stack up further, not allowing officers who want to become leaders within our department that opportunity, and not allowing for them to go forth with that.
All right, thank you. All done there?
Yeah, we'll turn it over to my better-looking counterpart, Tony, over there.
All right. City, what do we have?
That would be the chief. All right, I can address a few things in certain mic is off. Okay. I can certainly address a few things on behalf of the city, and then Chief and Ms. Metzler can also address a few things. Boiling it down, this is a grievance. So in looking at that, it's a grievance concerning, which is really becomes an issue of whether there is some sort of provision in the contract that was violated, or there is some sort of discipline that was imposed. This is clearly not disciplinary in nature. The chief has expressly said that it is not, as part of the communications that went along with this. So as is indicated in the chief's response to the grievance, this isn't even a grievance type of a matter that would be subject to arbitration. It's not even discipline. So that would be one aspect. In addition, there is no alleged violation of any contract or interpretation or anything of that nature that is alleged that the city has done. What has been requested is to pull this letter from the file, which is, again, is non-disciplinary in nature. There's no basis for that request. The employee personnel manual clearly talks about, and which I think the union has acknowledged, that the manual applies in absence of any provision in the CBA. The CBA trumps. I don't think that there's necessarily any dispute in that regard. But again, coming back to, there's no violation of the contract to support the grievance. This isn't a disciplinary matter as well in any shape or fashion. We have an acknowledgement form that's specific to public safety that, again, takes into account these issues between the CBA and the personnel manual. There are certainly many other provisions in the personnel manual that do apply to them, whether it be FMLA, things of that nature. There are also other benefits that Ms. Metzler can certainly talk about that the department is able to receive under the policy manual, whether it's like deferred comp, EAP, vision insurance, things of that nature. So they're getting the benefit of those provisions, but then saying now that this then would not apply. So with that in mind, I guess I can let the chief talk about a couple of other items and points that he wants to make as well.
Yeah, basically what this all stemmed from was they're objecting to the form that we've had them sign previously, the employee acknowledgement of the manual for unionized public safety employees. That's been a form that's been in effect for quite some time. The policy manual obviously gets updated fairly frequently, I think sometimes 2-3 times a year. Whenever we have a policy, we have a duty, particularly in the police department, to make sure that the employees are aware of the policy. Because if we were ever to discipline somebody for violating a policy, we have one of our 7 steps of just cause is to prove that they were aware that the policy existed and that there might be some consequences for a violation of that policy. So when they wouldn't agree to sign the employee acknowledgement of manual form, I was left with trying to figure out how can I document that they have been in fact informed that the policy has been updated. I had to have some record of that, because if some section of the policy that was updated was not acknowledged, or we had no record that they were aware of that, then I would immediately lose any disciplinary action, because I would not be able to meet that first step in the 7 steps of just cause. So my attempt, I guess, to rectify that was to have a non-disciplinary letter, basically just to establish a record that they were advised that the policy manual is updated. The letter that I had proposed does not require any signature from the employee. That was one item on the grievance that I noted. They were arguing about whether or not the employee had to sign it. There is no space for the employee to sign it. It's simply a date and time and who the form was issued by, so that I would have a record of who spoke to the employee, who provided them that notice, and what date and time that notice was provided. I also drafted a department-wide email that I sent out to everyone, basically trying to answer any questions or concerns that anybody would have about what happened if they chose to sign the city's form, if they opted not to sign the city's form, and provided them with the draft of the letter, basically reassuring them, or trying to reassure them, that it was non-disciplinary. I went out of my way to be crystal clear about that, because I didn't want them thinking that they were going to be subject to discipline for that. So I guess those are the points that I wanted to make. Is we still, regardless of what you find tonight, we have to come up with a system that will serve the city and the department moving forward, that anytime we update the city's policy manual,
we have to figure out how we then document the acknowledgement on the part of the police department employees that they acknowledge, okay, we recognize that we've been notified that the city's policy manual has changed. And frankly, that they are responsible to follow any policy that is not governed by the collective bargaining agreement. So I guess that is my challenge, and all of our challenges, is to try to figure out how we work this out so that moving forward, anytime the city updates its policy, it's not a big rigmarole to have that acknowledged and to have everybody noticed.
I was just going to add that, I think Tony mentioned, or Jeremy mentioned, that we've had this same form in place for the past 10 years, and it's never been an issue. Not saying just because it's been that way that we couldn't look at changing something, but nobody's trying to pull a fast one on anybody in the police department. Our policy manual is for all employees, so there's certain provisions that, as you mentioned, that talk about seasonal employees. There's certain provisions that talk about work boots for certain employees. It's a general policy that covers the entire workforce, so everybody does different things. We do have a separate sign-off specifically for unionized employees, which specifically says that the CBA doesn't apply in certain circumstances. The CBA requires us to negotiate wages, hours, and working conditions, and the policy sign-off specifically states that we agree to that the contract supersedes that. There's a separate provision, as our attorney mentioned, in the beginning of the policy manual that talks about, when the contract was silent, then the policy manual will clarify and add some guidance for employees about that. When there's conflicting language, then the CBA trumps it. So we're trying to make it as crystal clear as possible. Not getting too far into the weeds of this, but when this first came up, and this was not the current attorney that was representing the city at the time, the attorney was bringing up, you can't hold employees to this because they're not at-will employees. Well, that's not what the language says at all. We've agreed the language in certainly not, they're not at-will employees, they're covered, they're unionized employees covered under CBA. So we probably spent a month going back and forth about that. Then the next thing that the attorney was bringing up is the policy manual at whole does not apply. When we've pointed out probably 80% of the policy certainly applies to the employees. There's things that we're governed by state law to require to provide to employees, such as some of the things Tony mentioned, FMLA, EEOC policy, ADA. There's things that we have to legally give our employees and make sure that they understand it, and make sure if they have any questions, certainly that they come to us to ask questions. So this is, I feel like a lot of time was spent on going back and forth. We're trying to work with the employees. We've never, to my knowledge, held employee accountable for a policy that they've ever contested or that they've ever brought up that doesn't apply to them. Certainly if we were ever in that situation, this isn't anything that, we're trying to be difficult about. I guess I'm surprised, that this was brought forward, but it's just, obviously we couldn't agree. At the end of the day, I was coming into this thinking that the union was stating that this policy doesn't apply to them whatsoever. I guess this is the first I'm hearing that they're saying the policy does apply, but there's certain provisions that don't apply. So certainly, we've acknowledged that certain policies don't apply. The sign-off specifically states that. So I don't know how we can make it any more clear to them. But again, certainly this is something we've been doing for a long time. There's never been an objection to it. But if, certainly something has to be changed, it does. But we thought we could get that resolved over probably 2 months of communication. But unfortunately, we were unable to.
And just to add as well, there are, even with this latest round of updates, with this acknowledgement form, which, as Shannon indicated, has been signed for many years now, there are even forms that were signed by various officers with this latest go-round as well, while this issue was being raised and discussed. So not only do we have a lengthy prior history of acknowledgement forms being signed, we also have it with this last go-round that's now being grieved. In addition, I just would like to note that the WERC, Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission, had issued a decision a few years ago pertaining to the Ashwaubenon Public Safety Officers Association versus the Village of Ashwaubenon, in which the WERC's arbitrator specifically ruled that employers are entitled to issue letters and place things in an employee's file. In that case, it was a letter of direction, which is basically documenting and memorializing something. The arbitrator upheld the village's ability to do that, certainly when it was non-disciplinary in nature, and then even assuming if it was, which the arbitrator found that it wasn't, but even assuming if it was disciplinary, again, it goes back to there was no violation of any specific provision in the contract. So I think there's also support as far as the previous decision that's out there from the WERC in support of the City of De Pere's position.
If I would too, I'd like to add one item. We place letters in officers' files for a variety of reasons. And I guess I don't know, maybe the union doesn't even know this. They obviously don't have access to my chief's top secret personnel file cabinet. But in each personnel file, there's actually 4 subfolders. Only one of those 4 folders is for discipline. Some of the other items that we put in there is if we get a letter of commendation from a citizen. In a few rare cases, we have had performance improvement plans and other things that are also non-disciplinary in nature that are placed in the file. So just because a letter is placed in a file does not mean that it's placed in the employee's disciplinary subfolder. And I guess I just wanted to point that out as well in case that eases any heartburn.
Okay. Do you guys, if you have nothing else, then go ahead if you do. Otherwise, if you guys have any
I know you mentioned you might want to open for questions. I just want to give you all that chance.
I'll just ask one question, because the crux of this seems to be about discipline and non-discipline, because the grievance form, step 2, by the union states that the letter is non-disciplinary, not governed by the CBA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You disagree with the stance. Can you explain more about this discipline portion of it, which it seems that it's not, number one. Number two, it's been placed in the file for the last 10 years, and I guess I have to get an answer as to why now.
Sure. As to the place in the file for the last 10 years, to my understanding, and Chief, feel free to jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time a letter like this has been generated and placed in a file. So this letter has not been placed for the past 10 years. This is the first occurrence.
That's correct, and that's because previously the policy acknowledgement forms were signed, and then those were all filed with HR. So there was no need for us to document individually.
Okay, so it's the same thing.
Yeah,
We're kind of splitting hairs there. Okay, that helps.
Yeah, so the specific letter we're grieving is not, this is a new occurrence this year.
All right.
It's not a 10-year thing.
All right.
As to discipline, too, I mean, I think we all heard what the chief said. You know, you listened to it, you heard it. Specifically, you know, he said that per just cause factor 1, if he wants to prove discipline, he has to meet every just cause factor. Just cause factor 1, part of that is that each employee has to know the policy, be aware of it. He said that he needs to know that they are aware of the policy in case they have to discipline someone in the future. Mm-hmm. So if they're not aware of the policy, he would not be able to sustain discipline. That's exactly what this letter is. Just read it, right? It's really simple. You look at the first line of the second paragraph. It says, you have a duty to read, understand, and follow those policies, and failing to sign the acknowledgement form does not relieve you of that duty. This letter is going to be used to justify future discipline. This is going to be put forth as Exhibit 1 for Just Cause Factor 1. It's disciplinary in nature. I mean, if it's not at issue, they would never put this letter in. It's there for a reason, right? And that reason is, as the chief said, he has to justify Just Cause Factor 1, and that's what this letter is going to do if any of these policies are violated. I can promise you that. You know, it's really easy to say, we're not going to use it, it's non-disciplinary in the future. You know, the chief said it was, quote, crystal clear that it's non-disciplinary. Take a second and read this. Not once in here does he say it's non-disciplinary. In fact, the implication of the whole thing is the opposite. It's a pretty threatening tone of the letter. We have noted that you have opted not to sign this. You have a duty to read, understand, and follow these policies, and failure to sign this acknowledgement form does not relieve you of duty. Does that sound non-disciplinary? No. It's going to be used to justify discipline. It's part of a discipline file, and I appreciate that the chief has the 4 separate folders, that he said no one has access to those secret ones, but the chief, you know, we don't know that. It's much easier to make things crystal clear, and that's what the union's asking for. You know, in the in the actual policy acknowledgement, put one sentence that says, only the policies that apply to you do you have to acknowledge and understand and follow, right? There was a quote, it was a lot of time spent on this. I agree with that. And it's one sentence we're asking for here, right? One sentence going forward to stop this ever occurring again. You know, given that this letter is inaccurate and disciplined in nature, pull this letter. The chief even said there was a big rigmarole there might be a big rigmarole to have it acknowledged, right? The big rigmarole could have been avoided by one sentence. This is a very straightforward issue, and I appreciate and I trust everyone across the aisle from me that they're not going to use stuff in a nefarious way. You know, as HR director said, they're not trying to pull a fast one. That's all fine, but where is it documented?
Okay, my apologies. I asked the two questions, so you answered that. Went a little bit further. Chief, do you have any rebut for that?
Yeah, I guess with respect to the attorney's experience with our union, I don't think he necessarily understands that written discipline in our files takes one of two forms and one of two forms only. That would be a counseling notation and a formal written reprimand. This document is neither of those things. It is not intended to be those things. It is not intended to replace or supplant or do anything except to document that the employee knows that this policy was issued and updated. So I do take, I guess, a disagreement with his inference that it is somehow disciplinary. All it was intended to do was just note dates and times that they were put on notice that the policy exists. It was also based on our belief that they felt that the policies did not apply to them. So I also felt that I had a duty to let the persons know, yes, the policies that are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement do in fact apply to you. I don't feel good about issuing discipline to somebody if they don't know what a rule is or what the rules are. I would never want to be put in that position. And I guess in my attempt to satisfy that first step of just cause for any future discipline, I don't believe that this document is in itself any kind of discipline. It's simply an informational item. And again, it doesn't take the form that we have for our written forms of discipline. And again, we only have those two forms of written discipline.
Thank you for both your answers. Other questions, Alderperson Cuniger, and then I'll go to Alderperson Quigley after that.
So my question revolves around the fact that we've historically not had anybody not sign acknowledgement of the policy handbook, and now people aren't. That seems like the crux of all of this that isn't being addressed at all. And that would be appreciated context to why this is even a thing.
I can try to answer that. Just for clarification, are you asking if the policies haven't been signed in the past 10 years or so?
No, from what I just heard, I thought what I understood was that every year or when things are reviewed or updated, there's a commonplace acknowledgement. Those have always been done.
Gotcha.
And this year, this has not happened, which we wanted some kind of acknowledgement to not signing that document, which is just a validation of you've opted out of signing this. I want documentation of that.
Sure. It's kind of a two-part answer. You know, there's not an argument of a binding past practice here, right? Just because something's been done in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Just necessarily means that, hey, the union didn't feel it was worth its time or resources. I'm going to try not to get too into the weeds here, but when the union is deciding what issues to pursue, there's actually like fiduciary duties. There's a very specific enunciated test, like cost, how many members it affects, is it going to happen in the future? There's actually a balancing test they have to undertake to say, can we actually afford, and do we have like is this a good benefit to all of our members, or can we be personally in trouble as union board members for pursuing this, right? So just because in the past the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, so to say, doesn't mean that they assented to it or that they waived the right to argue it in the future. I mean, the other, I think, more straightforward answer too is, you know, the union recently came onto my firm. You know, we told them, hey, this is what we think you should do. We think this is right. And they're relying on the advice of their counsel from their new firm. So I think, you know, I think those are probably the two simplest ways to explain the sudden change.
All right.
Alderperson Quigley.
Actually, that leads me to my next follow-up question.
Yeah.
and it's sort of the same issue. It's not about this particular letter from the chief. It's if there are union members that have signed it for 10 years in the past, is there something different about the acknowledgement statement this year that is not palatable to the association members? And I do have a question for the city side too.
Sure. So I don't have the historical acknowledgements. All I can say is, I think it's common sense that agreeing to and saying I'm governed by policies that don't apply to you could necessarily make it sticky in the future, right? So when we read something like this, we're like, hey, we think this is a simple fix. This is why I think we should do it. So historically why it was never challenged, I don't know, but I think that's, it's just common sense saying, hey, let's all get to the core thing. Let's put in writing what everyone understands and let's get this solved. All honesty, I don't think any of us thought we were going to be here when we brought up this issue.
Okay. I do have a second question, but.
Go ahead.
And this is, again, for the chief or anybody on the city staff. In our packet of information, we have a page 180, if that helps to look at it. It's 16C. Under the employee acknowledgement of the manual, I'll give you a minute to get there.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. Under the employee acknowledgement, the first thing it says in parentheses, this is specifically for benefit eligible employees. It's excluding unionized public safety officers. Is there something that clarifies then if this statement that they're signing that says I've received these policies, I understand the policies, is there something that says which ones, that's where you go to the collective bargaining agreement and you say if it's not covered by the CBA, then it would be a policy that applies? Is that the intention of the city?
I think you're probably looking at the first sign-off. We included all three of them. Just flip
Okay.
down to the second one that talks about
Okay, thank you.
unionized public safety employees.
All right, okay. I got caught on that point then.
We put all three of them in there just to showcase that there's three distinct, separate sign-off forms depending on the type of employee, because we recognize the policy manual covers various types of employees. There's certain things that are in the policy manual that don't apply to me and our seasonal employees, but they have to sign off as well. I know the attorney had mentioned that the chief did not state that it was non-disciplinary nature. However, in the email that the chief, before he sent out the letter, he actually did a really nice job ahead of time putting together a very craftful email to the employees about this, giving them a heads up that the employees were gonna be issuing a letter put in their file. I know certainly we discussed, we could have taken the other position to discipline employees that were for failing to sign it. We didn't take that position. Nobody's looking for that. So the chief put together a written document about here's the document that's going to go in your file. But one of the provisions that he put in the email is what happens if I don't sign it? And what does this all mean? And specifically in there, he said, this letter is not discipline. It is not a counseling notation or a written reprimand. It is simply part of your personal file history and documents that you've received notice about this policy manual revision and that you decided not to sign the acknowledgement of the form. So the other thing I just wanted to point out, I know the grievance is about taking out the letter out of the file, but I know the attorney today had mentioned the resolve would be to add a statement in the sign-off that some policies may not apply. So I don't really know what they're looking for the resolve. I will say that this is the first I'm hearing that they wanted to add some language to the sign-off about policies not applying. This would have been nice to know 2 months ago. I think something like that could have easily been agreed to.
Why do they do that?
This has just been a long process. Like I said, when this first started, the attorney, not the one that is here tonight, was talking about this entire policy doesn't apply because the employees aren't at will. Then it changed to the policy manual doesn't apply whatsoever, and we just kept sending it back to the attorney saying, yes, it does. Please take a look at it. The policy doesn't state that they're at will. I feel like we've gotten about 4 or 5 different concerns with this. Now the grievance is about this letter being disciplinary in nature, which it's not. There's a lot of things that we put in employees' personnel files that are non-disciplinary, that we don't get approval to put in the employee's file. It's just a record of things that we have, that employees have regarding their employment that are placed in a file. And again, we could have taken a position to discipline employees that refused to sign it. We weren't looking for that. It wasn't worth the fight. We are obligated to notify employees of policies that we expect them to follow. The only other way in which we could do this is to basically put something in their file that, on this date, the policies were updated. We're putting in a notice in your file that you were aware of it. So it's nothing more than that. So that's kind of our position on it.
Thank you. I'm going to actually just go to Alderperson Gantz. You've been waiting for a while. Do you want to jump in?
Sure.
Okay. Question?
So I guess my question is, and you hit on some of it already, Shannon, but are you asking for them to rewrite some of these updates? And have you spoken with them about it? And which ones would they be and why? Because I'm reading through them and I'm not seeing anything that, definitely doesn't apply to us, take it out. I mean, they're general and basic, but what exactly are you looking for?
That's a very fair question. We are not asking for any policy manual updates to be rewritten. The total scope of what we think would have, what actually we know would have satisfied us and everybody would have signed, is just adding a sentence with the updates and the acknowledgement saying, hey, you are bound by the policies in the policy manual that apply to you, essentially when the CBA is silent. Just one sentence acknowledging the reality that the collective bargaining agreement is the governing document, and when that is silent, the policy manual applies. We weren't asking to rewrite anything. I mean, quite frankly, like any policy that actually applied to everyone, we were willing to agree with. We just want to make sure we're not backing ourselves in a corner that would say, hey, you guys technically agreed, and I'll be the first to say, I'm a lawyer. I know how lawyers are. We love to be technical. So I just don't want to give someone an opportunity to say, hey, technically you agreed to this policy, and even though the CBA trumps it, you agreed to it and you violated it, right? It's just making things ironclad, getting things in line with the understanding that everyone knows how the CBA and the policies work. It was literally one sentence just clarifying that, just on the actual acknowledgement. Nothing actually changed to the policy manual.
And had you previously spoken with them and explained that's what you were looking for?
Sure. So yeah, I am handling this. It was actually a partner in our firm who was handling this, and everything he told me was, yeah, that was made clear. So I can tell you, I personally didn't because I came on this really late, but our firm has.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Larry on this one. Larry?
Just so that they get a clarification on something. So Shannon, were you aware that they wanted just the sentence he's talking about added before tonight?
No, we would not be here tonight if that was the case.
Are we willing to add that sentence potentially?
I don't want to speak for everybody, but I don't have any concern with it. One of the things I just wanted to point out too, to me, this is crystal clear. The policy manual itself says many topics addressed in this manual are also addressed in specific employee bargaining group labor agreements. The provisions of a specific employee group labor agreement supersede information or policy provisions in this manual. Additionally, any wages, hours, and working conditions referenced in this manual that are subject to the mandatory duty to bargain between the city and the collective bargaining agreement are not binding on those parties except for the rules of conduct identified in this manual, reserved from time to time under city's management rights or authority. And then it goes on to talk about additional things. So, and then obviously the sign off that we have, not to belabor that, but it specifically talks about, that this certain provisions may not apply. So I thought we had it covered. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to know this additional statement. It could have been clearly handled in a email exchange back, but this is the first I'm hearing about that this is some additional language they're looking for. Again, it started off, we've gone around and around about this for 2 or 3 months with different concerns from the union, and this is the first that they're asking for additional language.
If I can just follow up on that, given the confusion in this, I think there might be a path to, maybe me and Tony having a quick conversation in the hallway, seeing if we can be a mutual agreement. Can we take a 2-minute recess?
You may do so.
Yeah.
You're welcome, sir. And thank you for the avenue for that, too. I appreciate it.
You want to go?
We are taking a 2-minute recess, folks, so we're going to stay right here. I think I might put the mics off.
Larry, you stole my question.
I'm going to mute the mics.
I was just thinking that.
The mics right now, so we are on. Who wants to go first?
I was gonna say, I think we can be agreeable to what we had discussed in
Yeah.
in the hallway and proceed with wrapping that up. So
Yeah.
And what do we say?
What is it?
that will be adding the language to the acknowledgement form that was indicated about.
Language will hammer out later to the effect of what the union was asking for, that we're only bound by the policies that apply to us.
Yeah.
And then the second part is just a, amendment or something else in the file for each officer who received a similar letter to this, saying this letter is non-disciplinary, and once the member signs the new policy acknowledgement saying it's outdated because you have signed the policy acknowledgement.
You're good with that as well, Officer Hanson? Okay.
Yes.
I know you're trying to make a decision with discussing with the attorney, so without talking to your members, so that's kind of a heavy thing. We're okay as far as the city's concerned? All right, so what's the next step then? Assistant City Attorney?
So are you at this point pulling back your grievance at this time? Would you like to hold
Yeah, so we have an agreement in principle.
Okay.
I mean, I trust Tony too, and I don't want to fully pull it. Just, I don't know the ramifications. I guess we could withdraw it without prejudice.
Okay.
I think that would be fine. Tony's an upstanding guy, and he's not going to backstab me. But in case someone else replaces him, then I got an ironclad way. So
Well, the sooner you talk, the better then.
exactly.
That would be good.
We'll be on it. We got stuff to talk about tomorrow. So
We would like you to talk about a lot of things. That would be good, yes.
there we go. And then Aaron, on your end.
Can I make a suggestion?
Okay, and then obviously the union president Hanson assents to withdrawing it without prejudice as well.
Very good,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, what do we have to do next?
Okay, so no decision is needed on this at this point. It's withdrawn without prejudice. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Thanks for being our sounding board, everyone, and thank you for your time. And
All right, thank you.
apologies for wasting it like I promised I wouldn't.
There's no waste in any of these things. We will listen to anything. So that means item 16 we are concluded with, correct? Nothing that we have to do as far as motions or seconds? All right, no action will be taken. Thank you, everybody. Item 17, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by me, second by Alderperson P-Rock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody.